So let's have our sit. So just connecting, if you can, with your body. Um, been been trying something I actually have never done before, which is doing a body scan from the feet up. And I believe in MBSR. John Kabat-Zinn teaches uh, the body scan from the feet up. I've always done it from the head down. But let's try doing a little body scan from the feet up. And theoretically, the idea for doing it from the feet up is that it's going to raise your energy as opposed to kind of lowering your energy. A lot of times when I'm meditating, I want to more lower my energy. So I'm trying to settle. But maybe after a meal is a good time to raise your energy. So begin by paying attention to the sensations in your left foot. Let's see if you can feel anything in your left foot. Now see if you can feel sensations in your right foot. Doesn't have to be anything special or particularly intense, just that you can feel something. And if you don't feel anything, just let your attention be in that place where your right foot is. And moving up to the left ankle, the left calf and shin, the lower leg, and then the right ankle, calf and shin, the right lower leg, and now feeling both feet and both lower legs together. The sensations now in the left knee, front and back, and up the left thigh, and the sensations in the right knee, front and back, and the right thigh, the upper leg, and feeling both legs together. Again, not trying to feel anything more than what's presented, what just is whatever you feel when you put the attention there. Notice if the mind wants to wander, particularly to other parts of the body or just into thinking. Now your attention is in the torso, the genitals, the hips, the belly, and the lower back, the buttocks. Feeling this whole area is where the weight of the body rests. when sitting. There may be a variety of different sensations since these are really different elements of the body. And if you've just had a meal, your stomach might be uncomfortable or feel very full, heavy. Moving the attention up the torso, solar plexus, chest, the whole of the back, the upper back, the shoulder blades, the spinal column, muscles in the back. Noticing the movement with breath of chest and belly and the back, expanding and contracting. Or can you feel your legs with your torso? Sort of an odd way of focusing the attention, sort of trying to feel several different parts of the body together. It's almost a trick of the mind that we can do it. And it kind of forces our attention to get concentrated. It takes a little extra effort, which can be helpful. Now let's go to the left hand. Take some time with the left hand. Let your mind move from one finger to the next, seeing how it's possible to feel each individual finger. And the palm of the hand, the back of the hand, and moving up to the wrist, the forearm, it's worth noticing what you're actually feeling. Are you feeling the skin? Are you feeling bone or flesh? I'm not sure we can always distinguish what part of that part of the body we're feeling. But the closer we look, the more we strengthen the attention. It's like we're using our attention like a microscope and we're drawing in closer and closer, seeing more and more detail. Feeling the elbow, the left elbow, then up the bicep, and feeling the entire left arm and left hand. Moving the attention to the right hand. Just notice the difference in the way your hands feel. That strange capacity to feel the dominant hand versus the non-dominant hand. What is that feeling? Not exactly a sensation, but a sort of knowing. So feeling the individual fingers on the right hand, the touching whatever the hand is touching, feeling the palm of the hand, the back of the hand. Moving the attention up to the right wrist, the forearm, flesh and bone, blood pulsing, the right elbow, the bicep, and feeling the two arms and two hands at the same time. Putting the attention now on the left shoulder and feeling the right shoulder and the shoulders together. Feeling the collarbone and the neck. Feeling where the spine connects with the skull and the brain stem. Now moving the attention into the head, feeling the left side of the head, the ear, left ear, and the temple. Feeling the left side of your face and the right side of the head, the ear and temple. The right side of your face, and feeling your whole face. Moving the attention up across the scalp from front to back. And feeling the whole body. alive, alert, present. Feeling the breath in this body. All right. So welcome, you brave folks coming out on a stormy night like this. Um, I definitely would not be teaching if I had had to go anywhere. So, so this is one of the advantages of remote remote teaching. That I could just pop down to the office for an hour, and so we've trying to get started on step 6. I tried to get started the other day. I didn't quite get off the ground. Uh, for those who might be here for the first time, anybody here for the first time with us? Okay, then I don't have to tell you that I'm working with my book one breath at a time. Um, and step 6. And so I'm going to read the first paragraph to step 6. That's about as far as I'm going to get, I think. Step 6 brings us to the central issue of sobriety and all spiritual growth, letting go. This is how the Buddha said we would find happiness. He talked about many kinds of attachment and the necessity of letting go of each of them. Attachment to material things and sense pleasure, attachment to views and opinions, attachment to relationships, attachment to your body, your thoughts, your sense of identity. This is a huge undertaking. In the Buddhist cosmology, it takes many, many lifetimes of spiritual practice to achieve perfection, freedom from attachment. Still, we can make a great deal of progress in letting go just by being aware of what is causing us suffering in this moment. When we see this pain clearly, it's easier to let go. Who would want to hang on to something that hurts? Well, dot, dot, dot. Um, so, it kind of presents one of my central theses that, and I don't know if it's true, and I think this is one of the dangers of teaching for a long time, is that maybe I don't know if it's a danger, but maybe it's a good thing. I question my own ideas, which are of course another form of attachment. But anyway, my central thesis being that the motivation for people to let go is when they become aware of their suffering. It's not that it's not the suffering, it's the awareness of the suffering. Without you can suffer if you don't realize you can suffer without really knowing you're suffering, right? Or you can say have dukkha without realizing you have dukkha, which is the word we translate as suffering. Um, but what I really want to talk about, and I'm sure the letting go part will come up um, again over the next several months of trying to get through step 6. Maybe it won't take that long. But what struck me when I read this morning was the the types of attachments, and I thought that was worth just talking about that and those things uh, particularly. Um, so attachment to material things and sense pleasure. So it's sort of appropriate maybe on Christmas, which in the commercialization of this holiday has become a lot about uh, attachment to things, and that's sort of how it's been promoted as a from economic purposes, right? And certainly as a kid, and I think probably true for a lot of children, they get really excited about the things they are going to get if they are fortunate enough to get presents, and then that's one like cultural thing. Other, if I was raised as a Catholic, but I didn't raise my daughter uh, in the any kind of Christian way, except we had Christmas and we had a Christmas tree and we had Christmas presents, and I imagine a lot of people now in America, at least, that's kind of the extent of it. Um, so not to be, not to like spoil Christmas, but that's certainly one of the things that comes up. But more relevantly for us as people in recovery, attachment to sense pleasure is kind of the central, essential problem, the first problem we have to deal with as addicts. And the Buddha talks about uh, different types of pleasure. I think I refer to this somewhere later in the chapter, but he says that he doesn't dismiss sense pleasure as as not being pleasurable. He doesn't he agrees that there is a certain kind of pleasure in sense pleasure, which I appreciate. So he doesn't just write it off. He just says that it's kind of a crude form of pleasure from his view. He considers that, a meditative pleasure, the pleasure of the peace of meditation, to be a much more refined and worthwhile form of pleasure, and one that has less um, danger. Is the term that we see used. That there's a certain danger in sense pleasure, because again of attachment, and that everything changes and you can't hold on to it. And um, of course, for addicts, the danger is, that how we do try to keep holding on to it, and that, we try to keep it from changing. Um, but so he ranks it at the bottom of pleasures, but he admits that it's a pleasure. Then he says that meditative pleasure is more pleasant, like and particularly the kind of when the mind gets really concentrated. And then he says that the pleasure of insight or awakening, that's really the highest form of pleasure. Well, the highest form of pleasure would be nirvana, which is just like the kind of, I think we could call it like the ultimate insight. But insight itself is seen as, a much more refined form of pleasure. Excuse me, and one that we're much less likely to become attached to. Um, and there's a famous uh, story about when he was really starting to figure it out, getting close to his awakening, that he has this moment of recollecting this meditative pleasure that arose for him spontaneously as a child, and realizing, oh, that's really helpful. And he asked himself, might that be a path to awakening? And then he answers his own question. Yes, that might be. I think that is a path to awakening. And and then he says that it's a it's pleasurable because he had these he had this is the jhanas, the meditative absorptions. He had worked with the absorptions, with the jhanas, in a particular uh, system, but he realized that it uh, in and of itself, it was a dead end. It didn't take him anywhere beyond just these jhanic states, or these deeply peaceful, concentrated states. And so he realized, oh, I can use this jhana as a way to prepare my mind for waking up, rather than as an end in itself. And the thing is, he said that there isn't the same risk of attachment. Now, this is something, I think I was talking about this recently, but that there's been debate throughout the history of Buddhist teachings, since the time of the Buddha, about whether jhana, whether these absorptions do hold some risk. And there are a lot of contemporary teachers think that there is a risk. Maybe, maybe they've seen their students get attached to the jhanas, and I have heard of it. I have one friend who kind of went through a dark night around that attachment. My own work with jhanic states never was problematic like that, but uh, you know, I was trained so uh, deeply to view all meditative experiences as impermanent that when I encountered these jhanic states, there was just this knowing. There was never like a thought like, "Oh, now I'm there. Now I'll just stay here." It was just so evident that that was not a place that I was gonna get to hang out beyond just when I was hanging out. I couldn't hold on to it. In any case, I've lost my thread a little bit here. Let me get back to these forms of attachment. So I'm kind of, as I go through them here, I'm kind of going through in some ways, levels of attachment. Certainly, material things and sense pleasure are kind of the crudest form of attachment. Well, so the next one that I mentioned is attachment to views and opinions. And this is where, uh, I think this is one of the great challenges. We can, it's pretty evident when you develop any insight, any kind of spiritual insight, that, oh, pursuit of wealth, pursuit of sense pleasure is not an end in itself. That can't uh, answer my quest for comfort, or it's not going to be satisfying. But our views and opinions, particularly because they're so subtle at times, and they're so deeply conditioned, uh, so interesting. Uh, as I've been reading a lot about the history of racism, I've brought this up with you guys. But one of the things that really struck me was how these 19th century, like, people who were supposed to be educated, like they would be pastors and sort of essayists and so-called scientists, would say, "Oh well, the most beautiful features are the features of white people, of Europeans, and black features are not as attractive." And it's just so clearly just a conditioning, right? It's just this completely, you know, like, uh, do you read like the view itself is so obviously just a bias and conditioned, but then to have what's even more sort of striking to me is to have the lack of thoughtfulness to question the fact that you're having this belief. Right? Because that's the attachment in a way. It's like, oh yeah, we all have prejudices. We all like the way certain people look and don't like the way certain people look. That's, you know, very conditioned, and we kind of know, oh yeah, it's just like your preferences, right? But then to think that those preferences are absolute truths, like beauty with a capital B is this and ugliness is that, just stunning. Um, so the this practice, I think, is so valuable in this regard that the way it challenges us to question our thoughts. That's the kind of how we put it. That's the way we characterize it, questioning our thoughts. But a lot of times, one of the things that we are taught to do is observe when the mind is judging. Right? This is like one of the common noting practices where you start to notice the thoughts, or when you start to note the thoughts and sort of put labels on them, and you start to note how much judging there is. And when you start to do that, you see how um, just kind of random, like it's quite remarkable to see likes and dislikes, preferences and unpreferences, and to see that they're so meaningless. You know, So many of them, it's like, why do I like that and not like this? Just it doesn't even matter why, right? There's no reason, there's no logic behind them. And so this practice can really help us to see that this is these views and opinions are just constructions of the mind, of conditioning, of cultural things, of upbringing, of some kind of just preferences. Like you like the way broccoli tastes, and you don't like the way Brussels sprouts taste. They're just the same sort of thing. They have no meaning. And the more that we can let go of believing that they have meaning, the freer we are. Right? That, it's okay. It's okay to have those preferences and to notice those things, but to not infuse them with meaning is the important thing, to be attached to them in that way. Yeah. So views and opinions, actually, when you, in the, was going to dig it out. I'll try to see if I can dig out this reference for our next meeting. That it it's views and opinions are one of the things that get let go of in the process of like the formal process of becoming enlightened in the Theravada model of enlightenment. And I'm not sure at what stage that happens, but there's like these four stages and different things are let go at different stages. So but the point to me is that they're important enough, views and opinions are important enough to be mentioned as one of the things that keep us from being enlightened, and that letting go of them is one of the things that allows us to really be free. And it doesn't mean that we let go of preferences. You know, there's a difference between, oh, I like this and I don't like that. Between that and this is good and that's bad. That's a really important distinction to make. It's not that we stop preferring things. It's not that we don't like vote or believe in like, something on this relative level. Oh, yeah, I think it's better if, the government does this than if the government does that. So I still am involved in that kind of level. I'm still making judgments, but I understand that on another level, there's don't know around all of it, right? Uh, because there's so many, particularly around so many things that we believe in, uh, uh, we don't understand what all the potential uh, complications are, the sort of unintended consequences, right? Now I might be getting kind of so vague that you might not know what I'm sort of pointing at, but so um, let me see if I can move on. Yeah, I will talk about a little bit more. So attachment to relationships. Hmm. This of course reminds me of the sutta that I wrote a chapter on this sutta in my book Living Kindness. The sutta that's called "Born from Those Who Are Dear," and I don't. I have told this story before, but I will tell it again. That I came upon this sutta not long after when my daughter was still quite young. She's less than 2 years old, I would say. And, and I was kind of when I saw the title of the sutta, "Born from Those Who Are Dear," I thought, "Oh, this will be a nice sutta about being a parent or, being the child of people that love you, and, maybe I'll be able to give a teaching to, on loving kindness around parenting." And then, so the sutta is about it's, a man comes to the Buddha, his son has just died, and he's uh, completely bereft and to the point of hysteria. And the Buddha tells him he needs to calm down. He says, "Come to your senses." Uh, and then he says uh, that when we are attached to anyone, a- another person, that sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are born from those who are dear. Suffering is born from those who are dear. So it was not the message I was looking for, not the happy message. So it was very striking. So, wow. So what is born from those who are dear is suffering, is dukkha. Well, and the sutta, it's an interesting one because it's like some of my favorite suttas. It has a little story in it, and this guy goes off angrily. He rejects what the Buddha says. He leaves, and after he leaves the monastery, there are a group of gamblers playing dice, and he goes up to them and tells them what the Buddha said, and he says, "But he's wrong, right? I mean, happiness is born from those who are dear, right?" And the gamblers are all like, "Yeah, we agree with you. We disagree with the Buddha." So, whenever you agree with the gamblers and disagree with the Buddha, you're pretty sure you've got wrong view going on, right? But then word gets to the palace where Queen Malika hears this, and tells King Pasenadi about it, and King Pasenadi is skeptical, and Queen Malika is this devotee of the Buddha and he's like, "You just agree with everything he says, that Buddha, you know, how can?" And I don't think he's right. But so they send a minister to the Buddha, what they call a minister, so like one of their like cabinet members, I guess, to go to the Buddha and clarify, did he really say that? And he comes back and says, yeah, this is what he said. And again, he explains it that if you love, and so the the message is, he says to the Buddha, to the king, well, do you love your daughter? Yes, I love my daughter. Well, what if something terrible happened to your daughter? How would you feel? Oh, I'd be destroyed. I'd be terrible. I'd just be, it would be agony. He said, well, you know, that's what it means, you know, that something's going to change. And, and anybody who's a parent, who's, there's a subtle, if you've gone through having an infant and then they start to grow up and then they start to talk back to you or they start to misbehave, or it stops being like, oh, I'm just cuddling you all the time, they're so sweet, and it starts to be a relationship, or you know or just that they grow up and they leave. It's like, it hurts, it's painful. I can Speaking from personal experience, it's hard. So this idea. So one of the things that I review, because in the daily reflections, the fourth of the daily reflections, um, there's 5 daily reflections. And the first 3 are about yourself. I am of the nature to age, to sicken, and to die. And the fourth one, I've sort of come up with my own way of phrasing it to myself, which is, um, I must be separated from everyone and everything that I hold dear. I must be. I will be. I must be separated from everyone and everything that I hold dear. That is true. W even if even if I hang on to everyone and everything that I hold dear, one day I will die, and at least then I will for sure be separated from them. But more likely, I'll be separated from them before that, and certainly from things, all your objects, they're all falling apart all the time, Um, so interesting, uh, but I think it also calls into question, and I think this is really a question for me too, that I've had to wrestle with. So if the Buddha says that suffering is born from those who are dear, is he saying that we shouldn't be have any emotional attachments to other human beings? And this is where, as with many Buddhist teachings, I think they can be taken as sort of, we make an assumption. Like when we say, pay attention to the breath, and when your mind wanders, we might make the assumption that that means we're not supposed to think, right? It's a very typical assumption. So that's kind of like saying, well, if there's attachment in relationships, you're going to suffer. So then we think, oh, that means I shouldn't be attached. what I think, as with the breath, it's not that nothing's accomplished by just feeling the breath. The point is more subtle. It's really that we start to watch what's going on. We start we train the mind and we develop insight about the mind and about the body. But when it comes to those who are dear, the point is that first of all, to understand that this, how do I want to put it? Well, I'll dial it back a little. Try to start the sentence again. The way I view this is that when we understand where the pain comes from, that's where the potential relief lies. The potential relief doesn't lie by just getting rid of relationships. That's not a practical solution. You can, you know, become a monk or a nun and move into a monastery, but you're still with other people. You're still going to make emotional bonds with them. That's just what human beings do. But the suffering that this man whose child has died, the suffering is because he doesn't understand that this is natural. When we understand what is natural, there's a difference then between despair and grief. A grieving loss is natural and healthy. Uh, Despair, because why is this happening? You know, what like the sense that this is wrong. There's something wrong with the world. Something has gone wrong with the world. I thought that the way the world was that my child couldn't die. You know, and that when that happens, then I'm crazy because I can't. I go crazy because I can't hold that reality. It doesn't fit with my understanding of reality. Whereas when I understand, like every moment is potential death for every one of us, then when that happens, there's the loss, there's the grieving, but it's not compounded by this lack of understanding, by this lack of insight. So this is why insight is freeing. It's not that it frees us from feeling pain, but it frees us from the agony of not understanding. Why is my life like this? Why, you know, when we struggle in our lives, it's not so much because, I mean, of course, we don't like the difficulties and conflicts in our life, but it's when we don't understand them that we really get spun out, and the real agony comes. So, I mean, that's just how I see it, and I think it's much more subtle than, "Oh, you just shouldn't be attached to people," but how could the Buddha say to us, "Oh, you shouldn't form emotional attachments with people?" I mean, if he said that, if that was his teaching, we would all kind of be like, I don't know if I really wanna follow this guy. Like, that doesn't really make sense." And so, I mean, I make an argument and I don't know that any scholar would support me in this, but there's a sutta where the Buddha, and I talk about this in Living Kindness, there's a sutta where the Buddha, when he was old, and some of his dearest friends like the ones who were with him right after his enlightenment, and some maybe before his enlightenment, who have passed away. And he makes this comment where he says, he's with this community, and you can imagine, he's an old enlightened guy, and the old gang is gone, and he's got this bunch of young monks, and he says, "It feels as if the sangha is empty. It feels as this assembly is empty without Sariputta and I think Mahamoggallana." And it he never says like, "I'm miserable," or "I'm suffering," but it seems to me, and again, I'm sure like Bhikkhu Bodhi or somebody would say, no, no, that's not what it's, but still, I want to, and maybe it's just my projection of wanting to humanize the Buddha, or maybe wanting to normalize enlightenment, make it like you can be enlightened and still be sort of normal and have normal feelings. But it just seems to me like, he's saying, it's kind of sad, I miss them. But he's not in despair, right? He's not going to lose it, uh, but, but he, but he feels it, and if he didn't, then I guess then maybe enlightenment is something different than, uh, I don't think enlightenment means that you stop having emotions. That doesn't make sense to me. To me, emotions are things that are in our bodies. They're part of our nervous system. Unless you're lobotomized, how are you going to just shut that off? No doubt, your emotions could be quite cooled, not going to be highly agitated. But so, I think this question, and this may be one that goes on for a while now that I've sort of started this question of attachment and where, what makes sense what is attachment and what's healthy attachment, what's unhealthy, because, from the modern psychotherapeutic or whatever perspective, attachment, right? I'm sure many of you have heard this, maybe all of you, that the bond that children make with their parents as infants is a vital form of attachment, that if it doesn't happen, people become really, really mentally unstable and unhealthy. And it's like, that's really a way to psychosis if you don't form a healthy attachment. In fact, a friend of mine wrote a book about that. Like, he's sort of an authority on attachment, and as a good thing, right? So interesting. So I think it's really worth exploring what the Buddha even means by attachment, and uh, as something unhelpful and harmful, and where the distinction lies between something like, uh, uh, caring for your family members and caring for people and loving them, and where that what he means by, uh, suffering is born from those who are dear. Yeah. Um, hmm. so I'm gonna. I guess I didn't leave any time for you guys tonight. I didn't. That was sort of unintentional. Um, but I don't want to stay late tonight due to familial pressure. Not pressure, but yeah, we've been watching movies together. So thank you all for coming tonight. And as I mentioned, I'm gonna offer some free books, and I haven't created that document yet, but for people to put their addresses into a document. And when my Daily Reflections book comes out, I'm going to send it to the select group of people who come to these classes if they ask for it. We're a little bit delayed in publication due to layout problems with a 389-page book. It's kind of difficult for us to figure out how to get it all laid out. So we're figuring it out, but it should be solved in the next few days. So with that, I thank you. And please stay safe, stay connected, stay attached to somebody in this time. Nurture your healthy attachments. Thanks. I'll be back on Tuesday.
Thank you. Happy holiday.
Happy
to
Thank you,
holiday.
Kevin.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin.
Good night.
Have fun.
Peace.